Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. Sorry for that delay. I wasn't sure that I was live, but looks like I am. My name is Karey Carbaugh, and hence the name of the podcast, the Karey Carbaugh Podcast, episode number 7. Can you believe we've already done 6 of these, and this is number 7? Hard to believe. Tonight, I've had several people ask me to go into my story. And so tonight I wanted to begin that series. I've titled tonight's podcast, Don't Be Afraid of Someone with Low Vision. And that title actually comes from a speech that I gave when I was in high school as part of the speech and debate club. I actually took that speech to state competition and won, I believe it was 3rd or 4th place in the state with that speech. I wish I could still find a manuscript for it, but unfortunately I have no idea where it is after all these years. So I'm doing this somewhat from memory and am adapting it a little bit. The title of that speech was Don't Be Afraid of a Handicapped Person. And I've changed that title a little bit for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's not really politically correct anymore to say a handicapped person. In some circles it might still be acceptable, but in many circles that's not currently an acceptable term. So I also wanted to make this a little bit more personal about me, so that's where I changed it to a person with low vision. Or someone with low vision. So that's where we're going to start tonight. I debated whether to put this at the beginning or the end of this series and decided to kind of lay the groundwork with this podcast. So a little bit about myself. I am a person with low vision. As most of you know, because most of the people that have been following this so far have been friends and people that I know personally. As most of you know, I am a person with low vision. I'm considered legally blind, which means that in the eyes of the law, I'm considered blind. That means that I can't drive a car, and I can't perform other tasks that are restricted from people who are blind. Whether totally blind or low vision or partially blind, the law doesn't really distinguish. It simply says if you're below, I believe it's 20 over 200. It's either 20 over 200 or 20 over 400. You're considered legally blind. And my vision level in my right eye, which is my good eye, is 20 over 650. And that means for some of you who may not know what these numbers mean, you may have seen 20/20 vision. Mine's 20 over 650, which means what a normal person can see from 20 feet away, or a person with 20/20 vision can see at 20 feet away, looks approximately the same to me. I'm sorry, let me back up. What a normal person or a person with 20/20 vision can see at 450 feet away would look approximately the same to me at 20 feet away. My bad eye is 20 over 1050. So that means what a person with normal vision could see at approximately 1,050 feet away, or a little over a football field. 300 yards would be 900 feet. So a little over a football field away is approximately what I can see in my bad eye. And a little less than a football field, 2/3 of a football field away, is about what I can see in my good eye. That's an approximation, and that's how they measure it. I don't know that that's 100% accurate, but so that's a little bit about me. The reason that I didn't do this off the start of these podcasts, I was encouraged to tell my story. Well, I don't view this as my story. Yes, I'm a person with low vision. I'm also a person who sings in a local community choir. That's a piece of my story. it's not my story. My story is much bigger than just, yes, I'm a person with low vision. I'll get into more of that in my next 3 podcasts. Let me just take a break for a minute and ask for some engagement here. I'm not going to try to respond to questions. I'm still getting used to how to do that while I'm live. So hopefully in the fairly near future, I'll be able to respond to questions live. But if you have questions, please put them in the chat and I will respond after the video's over. If you have things that you'd like me to cover as part of this series, please put those in the chat as well, or message me privately if you're more comfortable doing that. And I will be happy to address some of your questions and things that you might be wondering about. I don't have a problem talking about my low vision. It's just not something that defines me. It's not who I am. And I would encourage some of my other friends who are doing podcasts around being a person who is working through grief. That's not the totality of who you are either. Or a person who's chronically ill. Yes, that's a big piece of your story. It's not the totality of who you are. And I share that not as a cut down to either one of those groups. And I picked those 2 out because those are 2 that I've appeared on podcasts for. I share that not as a put down or a cut down, but as an encouragement, as a piece of encouragement. That is not what defines you. It's a piece of what defines you, yes. And it's something you can encourage other people through, which is where I'm leading with this as the opportunity presents itself to encourage people through what I have come through, whether it be the vision disability, whether it be something else. Those are pieces of my story. Those are challenges that I've overcome. They're part of what defines me, but they are not in totality what defines me. I digress. Coming back to the point that I wanted to make in the broadcast tonight, a lot of people, you might be sitting here yourself as one of them, but a lot of people think, oh, I'm not afraid of a person with a disability or a person with low vision. But is that true? How do you react when you're around someone with low vision or with a disability? Are you drawn to them? Do you avoid them? If you avoid them, that might be an indication of a fear. If you're drawn to them, why are you drawn to them? Is it to help them? And if so, is that a need of yours or a need of theirs? I think it's very important when you're coming face to face with someone with any disability, but I'll speak specifically someone with a vision disability, to make sure that that person wants or needs the help. I think back to a story that I heard as a child. Not sure if it was ever true. I'm sure something like this happened at some point. But the Boy Scout who was doing a good deed, helping the elderly woman across the street. Come to find out, she wasn't trying to cross the street. So think about that as you're helping or offering to help a person with a disability, with any kind of disability. I would encourage you to first ask the person if they need help, if they want help. I know myself, there are times when I'm in a grocery store and someone will ask if they can help me read labels, because I read labels up real close. And so someone might come up and ask if I need some help finding something. Sometimes I will accept the help and say, yes, please, because maybe I've been standing there for an hour trying to find what I'm looking for. Other times I might, and I hope I politely decline. I try to, because I know the person is well-meaning. I try to politely decline and also respect them and acknowledge that I appreciate them and their offer to help. But at the current moment, either maybe I've just found what I was looking for, or for whatever reason, I'm just not receptive of that help that day. So that's something to think about as you're drawn to someone. Why are you drawn to them? Another fear that people often have around someone who's disabled comes in the job market a lot of times. They may be afraid that the person with a disability could get hurt. While this is a real fear or a real potential, think about, is that true for anyone? You might be thinking, well, if something's left in the hallway, the person might trip and they might be at risk of injuring themselves. That could be true of anyone, not just a person with a disability or a person with low vision. So I would encourage you, treat the person with low vision the same way you would treat someone else. Yes, it is a valid concern, and there are certainly areas where you might need to take some extra caution. If there's vehicles driving back and forth, if the requirement is to be able to operate a motor vehicle or operate a forklift or something, those are valid concerns. But beyond that, is the concern real? Is it something that is more of a concern for the person with a disability than it is for someone else? A person with a disability is not, by definition, fragile or more fragile. Depending on the disability, obviously there are some disabilities that are inherently more fragile. The person is inherently more fragile. But specifically, a person with a vision disability is not more fragile than someone who is able-bodied. I think back to, as I look back in ancient times, many people believed that a person with a disability was the result of something that they did wrong, or that something that someone in their family, maybe their parents, sinned. As you all know from my previous broadcasts, I am a Christian. I don't hide that, but I don't necessarily throw it in people's faces either. I did want to share with you a verse tonight, though, that is one of my favorite Bible verses, because I think it really illustrates a lot of how I've tried to live my life, and a lot of what gives me the strength to overcome my vision disability. I try to present it as something that's positive, but yes, I do face difficult days. It's not always easy. It's not always a cakewalk, even though I try to present it that way. But a verse that I wanted to share with you illustrates this point about how people, for a long time, have feared people with a disability. They haven't known how to react. I guess some people have maybe thought that the disability could be contagious. I'm not sure. I have a hard time wrapping my brain around that, but I've read articles and read writings by people that talk about that. So some people think it's contagious. But in biblical times, when Jesus healed a blind man, the crowd and his disciples asked him, who sinned? The blind man or his parents? Whose sins caused this man to be born blind? And I like Jesus' response in John chapter 9, verse 3. Jesus responded, neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus, but this man was born, this happened, there's different translations, This happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. The way I've always interpreted that verse for myself is that my disability, my vision, my low vision was not the result of something that I or my parents did, but that God can use this for his glory. That God can use this to perhaps encourage others, but to show his grace and his power. Do I hope that one day I will be able to see? Absolutely. Is it something I've looked into? Yes. Do I waste time every day worrying about it or hoping that it'll happen today? No. It's a part of my long-term hopes and dreams. If it happens, that would be wonderful. If it doesn't happen, it's God's will. It's not something I'm going to lose sleep over. As I mentioned before, I don't mind talking about it, but it's not something that I dwell upon. As I mentioned in my speech years ago, I look at it primarily as an inconvenience. I'll go into that a little bit more in episodes 2 and 3 of my series here, next week and the following week. I consider it to be an inconvenience. Yes, there's things that are a pain in the butt to do. But overall, for most things, it's not going to stop me or stand in my way. The example that I used in my speech, I still remember this. I said that all of us, every single one of us, has a disability or an inconvenience in some facet. Perhaps you are someone who is too short, like I am. If you're trying to reach something on a high shelf, that's an inconvenience or a disability, perhaps. Can you overcome it with a stepladder? Yes. Can you ask someone to help you? Yes. Or a person who's too tall and is maybe trying to walk into a room. I remember a pastor that I had years ago who was 6'9" or 6'7", something like that. And I remember watching him have to duck to go through doorways. That could be an inconvenience. One might even argue, in some instances, a disability. So think about yourself. Think about what inconveniences you've had to overcome. Is it something you talk about all the time? Probably not. Is it something you gain hope through? Hopefully it is. Is it something you can encourage others through? Perhaps. That's why I wanted to start this whole podcasting series out with a few episodes about self-esteem and self-worth. All of us need to feel valued. Which brings me to my next point, and that is to allow the person with the disability, as I mentioned before, allow them to accept or not accept the help. Also, if there's something that they can do to help you, that's something most of us welcome. We're not always asked to help other people. I think because some people think we've got enough to handle to do our own thing. May not be entirely untrue, but as far as the self-esteem piece, most of us, and again, ask the person that you're asking the help from, find out where they're at in their journey and what they need. Many of us welcome the opportunity to be needed as well as to need. So think about that as you're interacting with someone with a disability. For me, actually, one of the most complimentary things that I can hear, and I do hear this a fair bit, and it's one of the reasons that I don't wear a sign on my forehead that says, "Look at me, I'm visually impaired." After I've known people for a while and they find out that I'm legally blind or that I have low vision, perhaps when they see me looking at my phone or reading something up close, I've had people say, "I had no idea that you had low vision." To me, that's a compliment because it means that I have managed to live in a sighted world. Because the world is not designed for people with low vision. I've never wanted to live in the world of the blind. There are people who are blind who do, and that's fine if that's what they want. But that's not what I've chosen. And so that was another point that I wanted to make is as you're dealing with people, treat them as people, whether they have a disability or whether they're able-bodied. I forgot to mention in the chat or in the broadcast earlier, if you're watching this broadcast live, if you could put an L in the comments so that I know who's watching it live. If you're watching it on a replay, put an R for replay. And we're going to be wrapping this up here pretty quickly. I think I've covered most of what I wanted to cover. I'm going to talk a little bit next week about growing up as a child with low vision. And then my third week will be living day to day with low vision. And there's going to be some overlap between some of these broadcasts. I just wanted to pick roughly 4 different aspects. The final one is going to be on traveling, because I know a lot of my friends and followers are people who like to go on vacation. There are some challenges. I've had people ask me, how can you travel by yourself with low vision? I'll go into a little bit of that in my 4th broadcast. So just to give you a little teaser for what's to come, if you've seen my announcement video or post, you know the titles of those 3 upcoming in the series. We can extend this series if you would like more, but I wanted to, when I discovered last week that February is the National Awareness Month for people with low vision, designated by the National Eye Institute. I had no idea. I thought, well, this would be a good time to, I don't want to say celebrate, but to recognize that month and to share this element of my story. Again, I don't look at this as being my story. Yes, it's a piece of my story. So once again, if you have questions, please do put them in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer those either privately, or you can also message me privately. And I'll be happy to answer those privately, or in the chat, or on future podcasts. If I know some of my followers have low vision, if there's things you'd like me to address, or if you'd like to be a guest on one of my podcasts. I'm going to be starting to look at bringing guests on in March. So let me know. I don't want to belabor this because I think I've pretty much made the points I wanted to make tonight. I hope you found this informative and at least to some extent enjoyable. This probably isn't one of my more upbeat podcasts, but I wanted to present it in an upbeat fashion. So hopefully I did that. And if you'd like to be added to my mailing list, my emailing list, to be notified of these upcoming broadcasts, if you could either put in the chat email or notification or something along those lines, or message me privately with your email address, and I'll be happy to add you to my list. I'm starting to develop that list for these future podcasts. You all can help me create where these go, and I would welcome that. So please keep the comments coming. I have been honestly, truly humbled and blessed by the comments I've received. I'm part of a coaching program for podcasters, and that's, some of you may have noticed on my wall that I was given an award by the, I just drew a blank on the exact name of the, Be Iconic World. And that was in recognition of starting these podcasts. A few people have asked me about that, so I wanted to share that. But I do appreciate you joining me tonight. Once again, this has been the Karey Carbaugh podcast, and I am Karey Carbaugh. This is the conclusion of episode number 7. We will start episode number 8 next week. So thank you for joining me. I hope you all have a very blessed week, and make it a good one. Make it a positive week and impact someone else that you may come across in a positive way. Thanks for joining me. Have a great evening until next week. Bye for now.